I'm starting on these Glaive Wraith Stalkers now. The names are all so huge. It used to be just elves and dwarves and ghosts, but now it's things like Glaive Wraith Stalkers, which rolls off the tongue like a rock. Anyway, I'm painting the Glaive Wraith Stalkers, and I wanted to show you another technique that I use when blending colour together, and that is to do wet blending. So for this one, I'm starting off with a dark blue. It's a mixture of black, dark blue and brown, and just painting along the top. And this is where it starts to get a bit messy. I'm painting this top area this colour, and because I want to blend this down into something a lot lighter, I'm actually going to blend it on the figure while it's still wet. Just carefully paint that area. Going to get in there, those dark areas in the middle with a dark colour. And really the principle behind doing this is that you can always touch up everything afterwards and clean up. But when you're getting that initial colour on, it can be a bit rough. So there's the dark area at the top. Now I've got some Sybarite green here, and what I'm going to do is paint that on. You can see it's very wet, and then I'm just roughly blending it together as I paint. Mix a bit of water with that so it's quite liquid. Now on my wet palette here, I can blend the two colours together and blend even more on the figure itself. And this way I get a nice transition between the greeny bluey colour and the dark colour. And then afterwards I can highlight this and blend them together even more. So you can see I'm starting to get a transition there between the two. And then finally I've got my wash, which I used for the green and blue wash, which I used for the other ghost figures. And then I'm roughly painting that onto all these little tendrils. And if I wipe some of it off as well, again just blending that with the colour I've already got. And you're probably thinking, well, that looks like a great old mess, but when this dries I'll have a really nice base coat that I can paint further on, and it'll be a nice blended base coat from dark to light. Now a lot of people are probably thinking, I can't paint like that, it's a mess, it's not neat. Well, don't worry. As I said, you can clean up afterwards. Now if I take some paint off my brush, I can dab some of this wash off so it's not too dark on the ends. Use a bit of water on my brush to make that stuff blend together even better. And there we go, a nice blend from my dark colour through a mid colour to a light. And when I highlight that, it'll be almost white down the bottom. Messy, but when it dries, it should come out quite nicely. In fact, here's one that's almost dry. And you can see we've got a pretty good transition of colour, and then I can clean all this up with some nice highlighting and repainting. It gives me a nice basis for a paint job with a blended base coat. So that's what I'm doing with the Glaive Wraith. It's hard to say. Glaive Wraith. Really, who came up with that? Glaive Wraith. Glaive Wraith Stalkers. I'll do some more work on these and show you what they look like when they're finished. Well, I'm about 23 hours in now, and as you can see, things are proceeding quite nicely. These are all the little chain rasps. That was the largest unit, and that took about 6 hours to do. These guys, they took about 4.5 hours, and these guys, the Spirit Torment, which is this one here. No, these are Spirit Torments, and this is a Grimghast. They took about 4.5 hours as well. So, pretty fast, not too bad. The good thing about this is that I've got this large unit done. So now I'm moving on to more interesting figures. I've just got 3 more hero figures to do for the Nighthaunts, including the large mounted figure. And then I'll be moving on to the Stormcast Eternals. Something else I should mention is I've got here a steel baking tray, and they're very, very handy for moving your figures around if you magnetize them. Yet another advantage of magnetizing your figures. You can transport these from room to room with great ease. So stick with me, folks. We'll finish these off, get onto the Eternals, and then get this game to the table. Well, folks, I'm a bit over 27 hours in, and I've just finished off these 2 hero figures. I particularly like this Executioner figure. It's rather nice, isn't it? Quite tricky to paint though, because it kept wobbling as I was painting it. I've decided to go with a blue spectral fire look instead of the green. So I'm in fact going to repaint this green one here because I think I like the blue light better than the green. And actually these are coming out really well, but they're a little bit more tricky than I expected because you do have to have some knowledge of blending. You can see on the cloak here of this hero that there's quite a bit of blending because it goes all the way from a dark to almost white. So you really have to do some wet blending in there. Now, one thing I did have to do here, which is weird, some of you may notice that this arm and sword is different from the one in the pack because when I took out my miniature, he had no hand and sword. It was gone. The mold plastic didn't go down into that spot or something. It just didn't exist. So I actually carved this one out of a little bit of plastic sprue. And it worked out all right because it sort of looks really rough and grotty. And from a distance you can't tell the difference. So sometimes you have to go to those extra lengths to finish off your figures. Right, the last figure I have to do for the Nighthaunts is this Knight of Shrouds on Ethereal Steed. And I'm going to stick pretty close to the Games Workshop paint scheme for this one because I think it works quite well. First thing I have to do, because I undercoat in white, and I always prefer to undercoat in white, I'm going to block in some of the dark areas in there with a fluid mix of paint and very, very roughly, just so I fill in all those areas that you won't be able to get to easily. And you might also notice that I've got a few scrape lines on this, and that's because once I've done an undercoat, you sometimes see some of the mold lines and bits that you want to fix a lot more clearly. So after I've done the white undercoat, I might see a mold line that I want to scrape down a little bit more and do a bit more fiddling with, so it's a bit smoother. So let's get painting on the Knight of Shrouds on Ethereal Steed. So the first thing to do is paint black into all those recesses that will be impossible to get into later after I've started painting in the rest of the miniature. Then I use some Ushabti bone as a skeleton colour and paint all the bony areas of the miniature. And I can be quite messy at this stage because I'm going to touch up later with quite dark colours. So I'm just making sure that all the white areas are covered in those hard to reach places. Okay, I blocked in all the dark insides of the figure, and then I put some Ushabti. Is it Ushabti? Yes, Ushabti bone. Ushabti bone. Oh God, these colours, the names, they're so difficult to remember and say. Ushabti bone on the bone areas, and then I did a dark teal, which was a mixture of Sotek green and Cabalite green. Mix those two together and with some black to give me my dark flesh colour, which is all peeling away and going off into ethereal bizzo. Done a little bit of metallics, and now I'm going to block in this area on the knight himself. The top area is going to be black. The bottom area is going to be washed as I would normally do one of the ghosts. Now I'm going to do a brown wash on all the bone areas and the metal areas. When I'm blending the colour on his cloak here, I actually set up on my palette a range of colours going from dark through to lighter, through a sort of grey and then to a white. And then I can always select the colour I need as I'm trying to blend through. So if I go to the lightest colours right on the edges, that's the white, and then I can work my way through the palette as it gets a little bit darker, and then blend it actually on the figure as I'm painting. And then I can get quite a nice blend of colour quite easily. You can use a mixture of wet blending and dry blending techniques. So dry blending means you wipe the colour off your brush and then blend the colours together. Wet blending means you add a bit of water to your brush and blend the colours together. Whatever method you feel comfortable with. And you basically just push the paint around so the colours blend together smoothly. You can see even there already you're getting quite a nice blend. And if there's a bit where there's a jarring transition, you can always jump back to the palette and get the right colour from the sequence of the blend and dab it onto the figure. Our knight is really starting to come together now. That cloak's looking good. Now it's time to move on to the horse. And this process really consists of doing some neat highlighting and again getting a blend on my palette between my light colour and my dark. Now because this has got a spectral feel, I've got quite a strong contrast between the light and the dark, which gives it a sort of glossy skeletal kind of feel. And I'm just going through and painting on all those colours and then lighting them up a little bit as I go. And you can see the results are pretty good. You've got an effect there of the skeleton coming through the skin. And when you look up close, you can see it's pretty rough. I'm not really doing fine blending here. This isn't a display piece, it's a gaming piece. So I've been pretty rough, but from a gaming distance, it all starts to blend together beautifully and look good. So it really depends how much time you want to spend on this phase. I put a bit of rust on those metallic areas as well, and here's my finished knight looking pretty good. Ready to lead my army into battle. And here it is, folks, the full Nighthaunt army from the Soul Wars core set, all painted up and ready to hit the table and start killing off those shiny Stormcast Eternal folks. I really like this army. It's got a lot of movement and a lot of character, and well, who doesn't love ghosts? Let's face it. It's fantastic to see a ghost army and pretty easy to paint up. This took about 30 hours to finish this number of figures. So that's it for the core set Nighthaunts. Now it's time to get on to the Stormcast Eternals. We'll have a look at that next.